Welcome to the ATV Community Podcast Series, meant to give Akwesasró a platform to discuss a variety of topics ranging from history, human interest, news, sports, features, and so much more. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Akwesasró TV or the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe. Yawa for joining and enjoy listening in. Sego Sawagwego and Watkwanu Aladus. I'm Regan Jacobs, and I'm your host today for this edition of Akwesasró, a history podcast. Today in studio, we have St. Regis Mohawk Tribal General Counsel Dale White to discuss the land claim. Sego, Dale.
Sego, Regan.
So we're just going to get right into it. What are we going to be looking at, in terms of discussion for today's podcast?
Well, thanks for inviting me, Regan. I thought today this is a follow-up to the podcast that we had a couple weeks ago,
right,
where we discussed a lot of historical matters.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it would be good in this one, to deal with some of the specific questions and issues that are out there in the community.
Right.
We hear a lot. There are podcasts out there.
There's a lot going on out there.
There's a lot going out there. People are talking. We hear the questions about, to be frank, criticisms about the land claim settlement from people out there. And we want to focus in on those and have this podcast be specifically to address not all of them, because there are many out there, but the major ones. So we thought I would dive into some of those.
Yeah, I love that. So before we get started, I just wanted to reference the FAQ document that I know that we spent some time putting together, and we want to let the community know that a lot of the questions surrounding the land claim can be found within this document. Dale has it on hand, but if you go to the tribe's website, you can find a copy of this. We've also posted it to our Facebook page, St. Regis Mohawk Tribe's Facebook page, and it does answer a lot of the questions that are currently being discussed out there in the community.
This is a really good document, and it's to show how long this process has been going on. This was developed last fall. It was developed and published or sent out in November of last year. And it's really good. I counted over 30 questions that were asked, pertinent questions, and it lays out what's in the settlement. So you can get this online and read it. There was even someone on Facebook the other day that said that they wish that people had seen this and read it, because it will answer many of the questions that are out there. It's a good resource.
Yeah, we're going to bring up the link for the community just in case, in terms of where to find it. But, let's start with something that I hear a lot out in the community, is that the tribe is giving up all of its land claims for money, and a specific amount being $70 million. What would you say to that?
Well, obviously, the people who are making that claim have not been to the many meetings that we've had, community meetings we've had where we've described what's in the settlement, and they haven't read the FAQs, because each of the elements in the settlement is in there. The $70 million is one of the elements, but it is by far not the major one. $70 million is not related to land. The tribe is not getting a check for $70 million and then saying that this is a settlement for all the lands that you've taken from us. It's not at all. And one of the things, and I've got behind me actually a map, that if there is one thing that I want everybody who's watching this podcast to understand, to take away from this, is the land acquisition aspect of the settlement. It is the key to the settlement. There are other things. There's tuition, free tuition in SUNY schools. There's preference power, and there are access to islands. But far and away, what we have in the settlement, and I'm going to show you the actual, in real life terms, what the settlement means for tribal members.
And so when you say acquisition, it's land that we're going to be getting back, right? An upward of 14,000 acres.
Right.
That's what you're referencing.
We lost about half of the reservation in the sessions that took place in the early 1800s. This is an effort to take the half of the reservation that we lost, 11,000 acres, and it gives the tribe a real opportunity to acquire all of that back from willing sellers. But one thing that people, I think, don't really appreciate is that we have 4 different land acquisition areas. And this is not new that I'm showing you. We had meetings in the community building here where we had PowerPoints. We had the tribe's outside counsel showing this map and showing how this works in the settlement. And this is a map that's included within the FAQs that you can obtain. What I've added here are some numbers here to show the tribal members who own lands within these land acquisition areas. Area A is the Hogansburg Triangle, and it's a 2,000 acre parcel of property. Approximately 65 tribal members own property there, totaling about 1,600 acres. So that land will then immediately become into the same status
Out of
as
2,000,
the lands that we have now. Right.
Yeah.
And then the area B is the second largest area. Overall, it's about 7,000 acres, and it's divided into Zone 1 and Zone 2. Zone 2 are tribal members. They are some of the 25, and they are the ones who currently own land and they're grandfathered in. The other western part of that, we have the other part of that 25. So there's approximately 700 acres in Area B out of the 3,500 acres that is half of that. So eventually, all of that land will be available for the tribal members to acquire and become part of the reservation. So you have those two, which are 90 tribal members. Those are in Franklin County. Area C is south of the reservation. It's important to notice that areas C and D are not within the boundaries of the reservation, the 1796 reservation. So we're getting those in addition to the current reservation lands. There are 16 tribal members approximately in Area C. They own about 600 acres. And then Area D is Roosevelt Town, which is also in St. Lawrence County.
Okay.
And you have a smaller number, but it's about 550 acres. All told, and this is something that I think everybody should appreciate, and if you learn one thing from this podcast is that the impact this will have on approximately 112 tribal members who own land in the land acquisition area.
Yeah.
They will be reclaiming or reacquiring about 3,500 acres of the reservation. So the reservation will immediately grow by 3,500 acres, and there is potential for all of these areas to be totally occupied by the tribe and acquired by the tribe. So we basically more than double the size of the reservation in the future. It's the most critical part of the land claim settlement. I can't emphasize that enough.
Right. Well, you have 112 tribal members that are affected. And I think some of the discussion that, or some of the questions that have been out there is what will happen if it's not settled? How will this be reconciled?
If this does not settle, then what happens is we go back in court. And then all of those areas that are shown here won't exist anymore for acquisition. We would have to go through this lengthy process of taking land into trust, which takes years and years and years. It wouldn't be the automatic acquisition in addition to the reservation, except for the Hogansburg Triangle. That would be the only thing left, and we don't know what the remedy would be there.
Right.
We don't even know if the taxes would be taken off of that. It just means that the tribe may acquire some kind of money damages for the state having purchased illegally the Hogansburg Triangle. So all of these opportunities and acquisition areas that would greatly benefit us would go away. It's huge. And put that in real terms, we've heard from tribal members, some of these 112 people who come to meetings. We had a meeting at the community building where they showed up. They desperately want this case to be settled because it'll take the taxes off their property they're often now foreclosed, especially in the Hogansburg Triangle. And this greatly benefits them, and it will greatly benefit tribal members in the future.
Right. I mean, it seems like you have done a lot of meetings with the community. Some were well attended, others so-so. But in terms of the transparency, there seems to be a lot of information that has been given to the community, but yet there's this, there's issue of this land claim being done in secrecy. What do you think about that?
Well, this is, I think, other than this notion that we're getting a check for $70 million in settling land claims, that's probably the second one, and it is the notion that this is all being this is all taking place in secrecy. There's no transparency. The tribal council is negotiating behind closed doors, and so that contributes, I think, to the people's notion that we're selling the land. We're not getting a benefit from this. That things are happening that people don't understand. But we've sent out lots of information. I mentioned the FAQs. That's probably the primary one. But there have been meetings where hundreds of tribal members have attended,
Right.
where we've gone through in depth what's in the settlement, showing this map, showing the terms of the settlement, the tuition power, the land acquisition, and what's happening with the islands. So the other thing is that this is, I was thinking about this. This is like the settlement that was voted and approved in 2004. I think that over the years, this settlement's been going on, the land claims, for over 40 years.
Right.
It's probably something that the community has been aware of, generation after generation, aware of, because it's something that's been going on, and we had a referendum vote, nearly identical settlement. So this is almost like the 2004-2005 settlement 2.0.
Right.
And we had, during that time, people go door to door, promoting it, educating people on it. There were brochures that were out there. There was a whole edition of the newspaper at the time that had maps and showed exactly what was in the settlement. This is that settlement brought forward today. There are a couple of things that are different about it, but people should know about it.
Maybe that's the difference too. When they say, well, it's done in secret, maybe they're referencing the settlement portion, not necessarily the educational, flow in the community regarding this, but more of what's in it, what's in the settlement agreement. Like maybe that's what they're referencing when they say they feel like there's a secrecy surrounding the land claim.
I'm not so sure. I think it's just another way that they want to say that this is a bad settlement. And but on the podcast that I've listened to, I've listened to people talk about the settlement, and it's as if they have not gone to the meetings. It's as if they have not seen the FAQs, because they're talking about we're getting a check for $70 million to settle. And that's what it's all about. So I'm not sure about that, but the referendum passed by 66% of the voters. And we're not assuming that people will carry that memory of the previous settlement over to this. We've gone out and we've had meetings, and we've reached out to people, and we've talked to people. Every monthly meeting that we have, pretty much, we do a report on the settlement. We're limited. One thing that I have to say as a lawyer, we're limited in that we cannot provide the actual settlement documents. We have 3 major MOUs. One is with Franklin County, one is with St. Lawrence County, and one is with New York State and NYPA. We can't just hand out those documents to people because they're confidential, and in some cases, they haven't even been finalized yet. But what we've done in terms of the FAQs is to break down each of the elements of those MOUs and explain, here's what's in it, in, I think, very plain terms what's in it, and we've even compared it to the 2005 settlement. And they're not identical, but we're getting more land in this one.
Right.
We're not getting other benefits. We got another $30 million in the 2005. We're not getting that.
Right. Speaking of land, another criticism or an issue that keeps coming up is, why aren't we getting all the land back that we lost in New York? And they talk about this 9 million acres. What is this 9 million acres, if you can speak to that?
I can. Do you have another hour to talk about why we're not getting that? I think this, and let me just give you a simple answer. I'm a lawyer. I've practiced Indian law for 40 years. And I can say without reservation that the American legal system is not very friendly for claims. Over 100 years of cases in the Supreme Court.
Right. We've seen this with other,
we've seen this before,
within our own nation. Yeah.
And I mentioned this at a meeting. A friend of mine wrote a book called In the Courts of the Conqueror. Walter Echohawk is the attorney. He used to be a Native American rights attorney. So we're in the courts of the people who took our land, so that you can expect that we're not going to get very well treated. It has some of the worst decisions. Some of the decisions that says that Congress can pass an act just basically terminating tribes, and land can be taken without compensation. So we start with that, and I guess you would say that we really never had a chance from the start. And so here's the rule, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this as a legal principle, but there are two types of land that courts look at in terms of tribes trying to recover the land or get remedies against it. One is recognized title, and that's what our 1796 lands are, because it was a treaty that was ratified by the United States. And so each of the tribes or nations in New York State, Senecas, Cayugas, Oneidas, also have recognized land. For example, the Senecas, they have the 1842 Treaty of Buffalo Creek that recognizes that their reservations, I think they have 4 or 5 reservations that are about 39,000 acres in total, or maybe more than that. That's their recognized land. And then the Cayugas actually have a larger area than that, and the Oneidas have a larger area, hundreds of thousands of acres. But here's the thing, is that you can file a land claim like we have in our land claim case, saying that it was not approved by Congress, but it has to be that recognized land. The other lands are ancestral lands. That's what we're talking about, the 9 million. It's the strip of land in eastern New York State that's 9-point-something million acres that we lived on, Mohawk Valley.
Mohawk Valley, I was going to say all the way down, yep.
So that land, under Supreme Court rules, under the American legal system, we could get some money for that, possibly under a claims case, an Indian court claims case, court of claims case, which those happened a long time ago, but we can't file the same type of claim that we can now because it's not considered recognized lands. And we're not unique in that case. Other tribes haven't been able to do that. So that's the difference between recognized title. It's the legal system allows us only to make these types of claims for recognized title. The Seneca Nation is a good example of that. They have the recognized lands under their reservations. They filed a lawsuit for Grand Island, which is near Niagara Falls.
Right.
And they lost that case in 2002 because of that very reason. They said, you can't bring this case under the federal claims, like these other land claims, because it's not recognized title. And there's a lengthy decision by the federal court that they can't do that. So that's likely what would happen if we tried to do that.
And I think that there's because of the legalese, there's half the time people don't understand, and not for any reason that we're all dumb and don't understand, but that there's differences with in the court system, and I think that sometimes that gets lost on the everyday average person who doesn't look at the differences of what you had just explained.
The Onondaga Nation is another good example. Their claims were thrown out of federal court for the same reasons that many of our claims were dismissed after the Sherrill case. So they had a small settlement for that involved Onondaga Lake, the cleanup of Onondaga Lake, and then they brought their action in the World Court, and so they filed an action in The Hague for the World Court to recover and that's not likely to be enforced in the U.S. system, but that was the only avenue they had to do that. Right.
And speaking of treaties, let's talk a little bit about the thought out there in the community again, misinformation about the 1796 treaty and that it's it's fraudulent. You want to
that's something that it's something that pops up every once in a while,
right.
In some of the podcasts that, well, what are we doing suing under the 1796 because those Mohawks who signed that were not authorized? Well, I'm not going to dig into that because there are people who've dealt with that and discussed that on both sides.
I think we have a
think-
podcast specifically dedicated to this coming
I
up
think
also.
we have, but the answer to that is that in all the court cases, in fact, this case that was brought in the 1980s, throughout this, and in our complaint, more importantly, the complaints that were filed, that started this case by the MCA, by us, and the nation, are specifically they've specifically identified that this is a violation of 1796, so we're assuming that it was valid and that it was ratified. And in fact, Congress did ratify it. So all the court cases throughout the land claims, there were decisions in 2001, 2013, 2020. I mean, they all recognize that whether people believe it or not, they recognize that the 1796 was validly authorized, and then once it's ratified, really, that makes it an effective treaty.
Well, you do hear a lot of like students and historians saying the opposite, right? That
I don't really have a problem.
that people were coerced into signing,
Right.
and there's all kind of sort of
and it's no
conclusions.
wonder, because that's how we lost collectively. All nations here in this continent lost just about all of our land. It was by taken advantage of by non-Indian people who were wanted to clear us off their land, wanted to move us out west, wanted to buy our land, and there were a lot of fraudulent deals that were
Yep.
done, and you can't ignore that. So
Yeah.
I think that they're entitled to their opinion about that. But for this specific case, we assume that it was valid, and the court cases have confirmed that.
Right. One of the things that I've also heard is that this is a terrible settlement. Can we talk about that for just a minute or so?
This is probably, for different reasons, this is probably one of the most talked about in the podcast. You have people who are talking about it. They're saying the council should be doing a better job. There's a better deal out there. But there really is no better option than we have now, because of much of what I've already talked about. That we've been in court, we've suffered court losses from the beginning. We've had decisions that have taken away most of our claims in the litigation, all except for Hogansburg Triangle. And for a time period from 2000, after the Sherrill case came out, and a lot of our cases were dismissed because of latches, for a good 5 to 7 years, we had no settlement at all. So we were going into court. So for people who criticize it, I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but they really don't offer solutions to
I was
it.
just going to say that I've heard a lot of criticism about it, that we should kill it, that we should just, not move forward. But what is the
Right.
alternative then? How do we help these 112 people in not only, the community, but getting more assets and land back for Akwesasró? What is the alternative
This is not,
then?
I mean, obviously this is not a perfect settlement. It doesn't get us the kind of justice that we deserve. If it was, we would win in court, we would have a settlement, we'd have more leverage for settlement, we'd be getting all of the lands that were taken from us. The title would be taken back in our name. We would evict all of the non-Indians who have settled on our property. But one by one, the courts in our case and the other courts in the New York land claims have taken away the ability of the nations to do that. So we have to operate from that. There's no option. There's no other option, and nobody is in any of the podcasts or any of the criticism that I've heard offered a solution using this legal system that we're operating under, where we're going to do better than this. And you see from the land acquisition areas, we're going to get land back. And if we work it right, and if we, over time, people think that these are lands that we're not getting right away, but in 50, 75 years, we'll own most of those lands.
One of the things that's concerning, I always try to go back to working in the community, as you have for 30 plus years now, and putting myself in other people's shoes, right, and thinking about why do they feel the way that they do, or, and I think that This is great information to try to, find some balance in what's going on out there. But if, one of the things I've heard is like no settlement. And I want to ask this again because I know that we referenced it in some of our notes, but does that mean we go back to court, like no settlement? After all the court
absolutely
decisions,
it's a miracle that we have the settlement
right?
that
I
we do
wanted
now.
to sort of talk about
Right,
that, like,
that we were dead in the water. We didn't have based on the Sherrill case. The Cayuga case was dismissed. The Oneida case was dismissed. The Onondaga case was dismissed. They were not able to achieve what they wanted to in their lawsuits. We survived, but we've only survived in terms of Hogansburg. The other areas were dismissed on the same grounds as the other nations' claims were dismissed. So we didn't have the settlement. We used some leverage to get back to the settlement table, and we're achieving, I would say, as much as we would in court, clearly more than we would in court if we went ahead, because we would just be getting the Hogansburg lands. We're doing that, and we're getting millions of dollars of taxes that will be taken off the books. For properties are foreclosed in these areas. The foreclosures will be taken care of, and so it's a great benefit. And I hate to say that we're lucky to be where we are, but we are really lucky to be where we are. And people who say that this settlement is terrible and we're not getting much, I haven't heard anybody say that under the current circumstances we could do better.
All right, Dale White. One final question I wanted, I think this is great. Some of the discussion, we're looking at what's out there in the community and what other podcasters have been saying, or, just generally a consistency in what's happening out there, what's being said. And one of the things that come up is that there's some reference to a decision in 2022 that we need to look at, and that we need to recalibrate our thinking.
Right. That's okay. Let me just put it in context. That decision. There was a March 2020 decision in the 22 decision in this case that was very significant. But putting it in context, number one, going back to a decision in 2013. Where we had all of our claims dismissed except for Hogansburg. We were back in court back in 2022, and we're getting ready to go back and litigate and trial the Hogansburg case. So that decision was based upon some motions that were filed by the parties to clear the decks for the Hogansburg case, and it said two things. It said that we didn't need to go back and show that the lands were illegally taken, that there was no federal approval. The court said it's already been shown. So that was half of the decision. The other half of it was in response to the counties, and I'm not sure if New York State was involved in the county's argument that the 1796 boundaries had been diminished or disestablished. These are legal terms in Indian law, that they no longer existed, that the reservation is everything minus the lands that were taken away. We won a huge victory by the court's decision there in terms of saying that the 1796 boundaries have never been reduced. They exist the same as they were in 1796. But here's the point, is that the podcasters, the people who have talked about it, say, well, okay, then take that decision and then you can go back on the settlement or the litigation and you're going to do a lot better. Well, that's not true.
Right, I've heard that. Yeah.
That's not true. It's good in terms of the boundaries being there for jurisdictional purposes, but that cannot be used to overturn the previous decisions of the court based upon Sherrill or based upon the application of Sherrill to the Cayuga and Oneida cases. We wish it would be, but it was not a change in the law in that respect. It's jurisdictional. It's good. It means it confirms what we've known all along, is that the boundaries have never been changed. But that's it. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't affect any way that our land claim would be negotiated.
So any final thoughts on the summary?
Well, it's been going on. It's weird. I graduated from law school in 1979. I'm not a youngster, and it's been going on it started about then, and it's still going on. It's time for this to get some closure in this. And I'm not going to repeat everything I said, but again, if people are watching, if you don't take if you take one thing away, it is what's on the map that's behind me. This is going to open up areas that we can reacquire fairly easily. I mean, we have to buy some lands from willing sellers, but this is going to expand our reservation, and that alone is reason to settle.
Well, thank you, Del White, for joining us on the podcast today. I appreciate all of these facts and details. And of course, the Akwesasró, who, those of you who are watching, I'd like to just say, a lot of times I come into these discussions very neutral. I'm learning too. So everything, that you've just talked about, I've heard a lot about. But it's interesting to go over it in detail, and I hope our community enjoys it. As always, we're open to discussions. You could reach out to us, and there's a lot of information that has already been posted on this on behalf of the tribe, including a video that we produced from Tribal Council themselves discussing the land claim in detail, not to mention all of the community meetings that I think you can still find on the portal. So we hope you enjoyed this podcast, and thanks again, Dale, for coming in, and for all of you for joining us today. Anna. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Akwesasró TV or the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe. Yawa for joining,